Before we have any introduction to our program, before I introduce who I am, we always pull up this slide first because I need you folks to give us some feedback about what you folks are seeing. After you folks give me some feedback, I think we will be in the right mindset and in the right place to start our lesson together. So if you can take 20 seconds to come up with 3 words, please write them down because I'm going to need to know them. There are no wrong answers. It doesn't have to be something really scientific. It can be anything. It can be a color. It can be a feeling you have when you see this photo. It can be talking about one side of the photo compared to the other. No wrong answers. Go ahead. All right. So what were some of the things that you guys have come up with? Well, some people might think colors, green, gray. Oh, what about feelings? Happy, sad. Maybe the ocean size. There's different sizes of oceans. One side has a lot of blue. One side doesn't have so much blue. One side has a lot of gray. There's a lot of buildings on one side. There's not so much buildings on the other. There's many things that we can think of when it comes to mind when we talk about this kind of slide. All of the answers that you have come up with, I'm pretty sure I've heard another student say that before, whether they were all the way as young as kindergarten or some teachers that I work with that are much older adults think very similarly. Being that we're all in a very, very similar mindset, you folks are now welcome into the program called Wai Ekolu. Wai Ekolu in Hawaii means the 3 waters. The 3 waters that we study in our program, the 3 waters that we take care of, the 3 waters that we aloha aina, Makiki stream, Manoa stream, and Pololo stream. And these 3 streams run through these 3 valleys that are shown in this picture. You may be familiar where this picture is taken. You may not be so familiar with where this picture is taken. On the left side of the slide, I think you guys can see my arrow, my little pointer here. The left side of this slide is Pololo Valley. Towards the middle and to the right of this ridge here is Manoa Valley. Behind this ridge here on the right is Makiki Valley. And there are 3 streams that run through them. These are the streams that we study for our program and we take care of. And these are the ones that might pass many of your schools. If you go to school in this area, if you live in this area, down further along the coastline, you might see Waikiki. You might also see Diamond Head. And again, these 3 streams come together in a canal. That canal is called the Alawai Canal. All of these 3 streams go to the ocean as all streams that you folks may have heard of or may have been to before. All right, so now that we're familiar with this area, again, this program called Wai Ekolu, it's not only the water that we take care of in our valleys here, it is the people that do it, the people that care for the land, the people that are taking the time to understand more about their place and in their community. I want to thank you for joining us and I want to welcome you folks to this program. I am Uncle Corey and I work at the University of Hawaii at Manoa and I also work at Iolani School. I spend a lot of time talking to students just like you and about subjects we're about to talk about right now. So thinking about water, thinking about how important it is to all of us. Not only does it flow through our land, there are so many plants and there's so many animals besides humans that depend on water every day. These are just some of them. Some of them may be familiar to you. Some of them may not be so familiar to you. And some of the things that you know might not be on this slide. There are just some of the plants and animals that I am familiar with that I'd like to share with you. We have plants and fish and snails and dolphins and monk seals and turtles and happy-faced spiders and shrimp and different types of snails called opihi, different types of trees and insects. Again, there are so many plants and animals out there that are very special to this place. And all of these plants and all these animals that I'm showing you on this slide are all native animals, meaning they got to Hawaii on their own without the help of people. If you have any questions about any of these plants or animals, please let me know. There are a lot of them on this slide, and I understand we may not have a ton of time to talk about them today. All of these native species, or these native plants and animals, have come to Hawaii on their own without the help of people. You may recognize a map like this, and I'm sorry, it's a little distorted because I'm trying to highlight the Pacific Ocean. And there, near the center of the Pacific Ocean, a little bit to the north, kind of in the North Pacific, is Hawaii. We can see how isolated we are compared to other areas around the world, like Asia, North America, Australia, and South America, we can see all these land masses are quite far away from us. How do some of those plants and some of those animals that we just talked about on the previous slide get here to Hawaii? Let's think about it for a second. Well, we saw some birds on that previous slide. Could they fly here? Of course they can. What about those other animals or plants? Well, plants, maybe they have seeds that could have blown here by the wind. Maybe their seeds are sticky, and maybe they hitched a ride here on a bird or some other animal that can fly, maybe like a bat, and maybe they got here that way when those animals came here to Hawaii. What about maybe things like a coconut or other types of vegetation that are very tolerant of salt water? Maybe they could have floated across the Pacific. What about fishes, dolphins, and whales? Could they swim here from very far away? They sure can. And in the Wai Ekolu, as you can imagine, we like to study things that have to do with water. So let's focus a little bit about some of the things that have come here by water. Take a second to think about it. What do you think these arrows are representing around this ocean here? If you came up with the word currents or waves, that is an excellent answer. And currents and waves aren't so simple as these circular patterns that move around in the ocean. They're much more complex than this. But if we were going to try to simplify it just for the purposes of this class, they might look like this. And you might see that this pattern is something that animals, like the ones that we just talked about that have got here by water, may use to get here. But there are other animals that we didn't talk about that may use these currents to get here to Hawaii. Animals in this form, which we call, starts with a P, you might recognize it from SpongeBob, they are called plankton. Plankton. So this type of animal, the first one here, it is a fish plankton, or the part of its life when it's plankton. This is a snail in the part of its life when it's a plankton. This is a barnacle in the part of its life when it's plankton. And this one right here is a crab in the part of its life when it's plankton. And if you're not familiar with plankton, I know some of you guys are, but if you're not familiar with what plankton are, they're very tiny animals that live in the ocean. Some of them are so tiny you might not be able to see them without a magnifying glass or with a microscope. So they are very small animals, but sometimes they grow into much larger animals, like you have just heard me say about fish, snails, barnacles, and crabs. And they are usually a little bit larger, things you can see scurrying around the ocean bottom or swimming around the surface of the water, and you can recognize them very easily. When they're babies like this, they can float around in the ocean currents, and they can do this for many, many months, traveling very, very far before they find a place where they will call home. And maybe floating around the Pacific there, they may come from other places on their own to Hawaii using these currents across the Pacific Ocean. All right, so it might look just like this. Maybe these plankton that are snails, and maybe this is plankton that are shrimp. And what about these plankton that are fish? They are floating around there, probably in the millions and millions of them,